All good to go? All right, I'm going to admit all. All right. We recording? Good?
Okay, you can go ahead. Okay, so welcome to the Design Advisory Panel meeting for September 8th. And just like to welcome everybody here and call the meeting to order. Also like to note that, just remind everybody this meeting is live streamed and video recorded, but we also have a live, for the first time in almost 2 years, an audience and people attending in the boardroom here at the city offices. So just keep all that in mind. So great. And I don't think we have any late items, although we did receive an addendum to the first proposal tonight, the one at 254 Adderley. And so that's been added to the agenda. So has everybody seen that addendum?
No, I couldn't print it.
You couldn't print it?
No, I was out of the office and I just had my phone with me. And
oh, okay. Well, I think we'll probably just, maybe the applicant can also explain what was changed in those 6 pages, because I wasn't quite sure myself, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. So can I have a motion to accept the agenda with the added addendum? Kevin, and a seconder, Angela. Kate, you wanted to say something?
I did. I was just let in now, and I was trying to figure out what the protocol was for me today. So I'm not presenting our project. Chris will be, and
we'll talk about that when we get to that.
Okay.
You're part of the panel for this part of the meeting. We're just opening.
Okay, so you did just let me in. Okay.
So once we get to that project, then we need to figure out what the procedure is for you. Okay. So do I have all in favor for the agenda? No, did I have a seconder? Oh yeah, Angela seconded. That's right. Okay, so all in favor? Okay, carried. We can start our meeting. Okay, so tonight we have 2 presentations. The first of which is a project at 254 Adderley Road, and it'll be introduced by Christine Mays. And so I think, Christine, maybe we need to first discuss then what we do with Kate. I'm trying to recall what we did before, Kate, if you just left.
Yeah.
The landscape portion.
Yeah, it's going to be challenging for this project, because I anticipate there being a lot of questions, and last time we weren't allowed to answer the questions, so I'm not sure. And I'm not presenting, so Chris is. So I think we left until you called us back in, and then we presented, and then we left again, and then I think I'm called back for the project number 2
for questions. Okay.
Or no, I don't think we were called back for questions.
Okay, I'd say if you leave now, and we'll do the presentation up to the landscape, then you can come in and do the landscape, and then we can hold some questions from there. How does that sound?
Okay, sounds good.
Madam Chair, Kate would be in conflict, but I don't think her associate there who's doing the presentation would be in conflict. So I think Kate just has to remove herself, and that she's going to be part of the presentation.
Your associate's doing the presentation. Okay.
So I think Kate just needs to remove herself from this application and come back in for the second application.
Oh, okay. I didn't understand that. So that sounds like a good plan. Let's do that.
So,
you can step out for now and come back for the second application tonight.
Okay, I'll leave, and then Chris will log on with his name.
So what I can do, Kate, is I can put you in the waiting room, and I'll bring you back in for the next one.
Oh, me? Okay,
Yeah.
We're using the same camera. Okay, yes. Well, yes. Okay, we'll see how this works.
All right, we'll give it a try.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Christine, with your introduction then.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So development permit application DP 1267 is for a 13 3-story ground-oriented multifamily residential building development, and that comprises of 53 3-bedroom units, 12 4-bedroom units, and 6 5-bedroom units. So that is a total of 71 townhouse units. The subject property is zoned steep slope residential R10 on the larger portion, so it is a hook lot, and single dwelling residential R1 on the smaller portion. And it's designated suburban neighborhood in the city plan. So it's located at the terminus of Montclair Drive, at the boundary of the Westwood neighborhood. That's adjacent to the neighborhood, the Nanaimo Parkway. So this hook lot is split by Tralee Road. It is irregularly shaped, with the development proposed to occur on the larger R10 zone portion of the lot. It's currently vacant with some second growth forest sloping down towards the parkway. The subject property also falls within Development Permit Area 6, and that's Steep Slope Development, Development Permit Area 7, which is Nanaimo Parkway Design, and Development Permit Area 8, which is Forming Character. There are 3 sets of guidelines that are applicable to this application. That's the General Development Permit Area Design Guidelines, Nanaimo Parkway Design Guidelines, and the Steep Slope Development Permit Area Guidelines. And so those are all considered in the staff design comments. There are new proposed variances for the application, and I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so the applicant can take over from here. Glenn, are you presenting tonight?
Yes, I will be. Sorry, I think Angela had her hand up.
Yeah, you can go ahead and share your screen anytime.
Okay, all right.
I just had a question for staff. Should I wait till the end?
I'll let the chair decide.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, was that you, Angela, that asked that?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we'll get to that after the presentation.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, hi, my name is Glenn Hill. I'm from DHK Architects. Myself and Claire, who is also on the screen from DHK, have been leading the design team through this project. We have the owner representatives are with us this evening to listen in. And yeah, so I will. I'll keep it short. I know we've only got about 15 minutes. So as Christine mentioned, it's a 71 unit development at 254 Adderley Road. Everybody can see my screen, I take it. Yes, good. Okay, so just as an introduction, the image that you see here is the gateway into the development at the end of Montclair. Some of the project data, which you probably already know, we've got 71 units permitted. The proposed FAR is 0.45 within the R10 zone. This permits the 71 units based on 16 units per hectare. The permitted lot coverage is 40%. Our development proposes a lot coverage of 18.8% over the entire site. I've just added one little note here that we took a takeoff of the area of the site that we could actually develop on. So that excluded the 20-meter tree protection buffer along the parkway. And that reduces the site area down to 23, just over 23,000 square meters. Which then gives us a potential lot coverage of 36.39%. So even by eliminating all of the preserve and extra setbacks, we are still kind of meeting our target of below 40% on lot coverage, just as a sort of a sidebar. We have a parking count of 174 stalls. That's based on some design criteria, which we'll be able to better illustrate to you whenever we get into the site plan drawings. And we have not requested any variances for height or property line setbacks. And this is a quick context board for you. The site in red is the entire Panhandle property. You can see clearly that the north boundary is the rock bluff, one of the rock bluffs of the Nanaimo Parkway. To the south, the Montclair is the primary public street down to the end, and our site entrance is at the end of Montclair. Another little bit of context. Sort of, this is the College Heights neighborhood. This is the sort of the roads that flank off of Jingle Pot on the north. We've got the baseball diamonds, and just over to the east of us and the south is Vancouver Island University and all of the associated sports fields, et cetera, et cetera. So this illustrates our the zone within which we have condensed and isolated the development to the R10 zone. And this is a sort of a snapshot of what we're proposing. As Christine said, we've got a cluster of 13 buildings. The site design is orientated around a practical placement of two access driveways. Drew can talk a little bit whenever it's his turn to kind of chime in here on essentially the road was located in as practical a location as possible based on the existing grades to minimize the site disturbance. The driveways that you see along the uphill slopes are designed to bring the grade of the buildings on the uphill side up from the driveway a little bit to create a bit of a separation. These driveways are all potentially capable of receiving an additional parking space. One of the big concerns that we had was making sure that parking was going to be contained on site and not outflow onto Montclair and cause any kind of additional congestion. So we part of the rationale for our parking is to provide appropriate and good proximity to two parking stalls for every unit, no matter where it is on the property, and that would also include taking advantage of some of the longer driveways that are generated through the grading exercise. Those are additional spaces where we hope parking could occur if there are additional family members with vehicles, or if there's a bunch of visitors coming, that they have somewhere to go. The big ambition that we have with this is to deter people from parking on the street, assuming that it is going to be a neighborhood of families in these larger homes. The upper road takes us out to the east. That's a 7-meter road with a sidewalk. Building 1, building 2, and 3, and 4 are our larger units, and then we have an array of the one garage townhomes along the lower road, which takes you down to the very north part of the site. And then building 13 is a little bit of an anomaly. It has slightly varied unit plans, and it sits on the bench over to the east. This line represents the tree protection character zone, and this is the character protection zone and the tree protection zone from the parkway. This quickly illustrates site sections relative to our adjacency to the parkway, illustrating that sort of view corridors from vehicles are kind of as diagrammed. The section cut here illustrates the orientation of our uphill and downhill unit types. We've got an internal street with a downhill site and an uphill building, and then another internal street with a downhill building and an uphill building. These are some site sections just to sort of give you an understanding of how the units were designed in order to kind of maintain those nice views across roof lines to all of the views to the north and to the east across the town. A quick overview of our unit types. We've got an uphill slope unit type. We have the uphill and downhill types, and then we have the larger units. I know you've seen these plans. We can refer back to them as part of the question and answers. So our materiality was sort of largely driven by inspiration from the site, the kind of the forested nature of the site, the granite outcrops, and a general keeping within the design guidelines of working with muted tones and materials that would reference back to the nature of the site. So we have a combination of muted gray tones for our flashings. We've got wood look metal, which is highly durable and sort of speaks back. And then we've got the darker wood cladding and the lighter gray cladding. So a whole palette of fairly soft palette tones that reflect well with each other. And then with that, we'll just sort of do a little pictorial here. So this is our best attempt to render in the entry into the development with the signage welcoming people. There is a featured landscape element right at the entry. The road peels up to the west and then down to the east. This is approximately the adjacent single-family homes at the end of Montclair. This illustrating kind of the end of the street currently. So our building elevations illustrate how we have arrayed the tones of the woodland colors, the muted grays, and we've got balconies across the front. These balconies stretch out over the garage doors, hopefully kind of detracting from them as a primary element. But the deck space and the wood soffits underneath acting as our kind of primary architectural elements. The slope grooves are a major part of our architectural design. We feel it worked well with the sort of the stepping nature of the site. It gave us an opportunity to kind of step and play with the undulating roof lines to create that variation across all of the buildings. Just some more illustrations of how the buildings are similar in character and just adjust slightly based on the topography that they're placed in. We have entry level units here, which would cascade down the hill, and then we have on the back side, this is the 3-story nature of that same unit. Again, with building 13, it's a little bit of a unique one. It has a unique unit at the end and its own sort of driveway. And then the rest of these elevations are just quickly kind of illustrating to you that we've worked really hard to kind of make sure that we get the building design within the permitted building heights. You can see here the red line illustrating the maximum height, and then as we sort of step and terrace, we actually kind of peel away from that maximum height line. So each building had its own independent study done so that we could confirm that we were working within the height while still maintaining the sort of the interesting form and character of the buildings. Again, this is sort of illustrating similar kind of concept. And then more of the buildings. There's a lot of buildings and a lot of elevations, so I'll go through quickly, and then if you have questions, we can you can ask them. So this is a kind of a pictorial view of the development as we see it proposed based on building the model in building up our 3D model using the existing contours and then simulating the buildings placed at the appropriate finished grade levels. You can see the view from the parkway at the corner of Jingle Pot, driving south, and then this would be a version of sort of post-development. You can see a little closer here as we get right up to the intersection where the buildings are revealed at the back from the bluff. This is an overview. This is the entry down from Montclair. So we would come into the low road is down here. The upper road comes up this way, and then we take a right turn, and the last building, which is backed and dropped down from the neighboring single-family neighborhood. This gives you an idea of the kind of overview of the city that is possible from the development. Another illustration of the parkway and how with the tree protection, the character protection and the tree protection zone, the development does nestle quite nicely in behind that natural buffer from the parkway, which was expected as part of the design guidelines within the parkway. And then sort of focusing in a little closer, part of our plan was to have a clean open street with planting separating people's driveways and entries, and some areas at grade level to sort of sit and hang out, say hi to your neighbor, and then an extensive replanting of trees post construction, which Chris can talk a little bit more about. But we wanted to sort of give you the form and character of the street and the neighborhood that we want to try and create. So you can see kind of garages are tucked away underneath these decks and open space amenities for the units, and then some patio grade level entry landscape and areas to sort of sit and engage with the street. This illustration is basically the majority of our buildings form and character rest within this palette of materials where wood tones are mixed out with the muted gray panel, and then we switch gears a little bit with our materiality, so we break away from the kind of monotony of multiple buildings with exactly the same material. This is a shot of the lower road at the turnaround. So this incorporates a little extra visitor parking notched into the hill. It's also where the fire truck turnaround has been designed so that vehicles can come down and appropriately turn around and leave. We're also anticipating a private garbage pickup. So all of our units have been designed with space within the garage for secure bicycle storage. The garages will all have EV charging capacity, and there will be space for long-term and secure storage for bicycles within each of the garages. You'll notice in the site plan we do have a garbage enclosure noted on the plan. We wanted to, because we haven't confirmed the garbage service, we wanted to kind of acknowledge a form and character for the garbage enclosure, and with the hope that we could eliminate that with the confirmation of a private pickup and driveway service, in which case we could convert that area into more amenity within the site. So I will let Chris continue on with supporting landscape design. Chris?
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Thank you and good evening. And thank you for the opportunity to present this project. My name is Chris Midgley. I work with Kate Stefuk at Kinship Design Art Ecology. I'm going to have to ask Glenn to be my navigator, if that's okay, Glenn. And so as this is the cover page, feel free to just advance to the next slide to show the landscape plan, I believe. I hope. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so just looking, I'll give a brief description of our approach to the landscape here, and then wander through the site at some of the key elements and features, and then touch on what I think are some of the more important or relevant points with respect to the development permit approval process and that sort of thing. So in terms of an inspiration or a rationale for the landscape, our approach was to take a very restorative approach and try to rebuild a reference ecosystem that reflects the Coastal Douglas fir ecosystem once development has largely been put into place on site. So we're drawing inspiration from the dramatic natural landscape that you can see here, sort of adjacent to the cliffside. And the edge condition that creates overlooking the city of Nanaimo. So while the site has already been largely cleared of city-linked trees and overtaken by invasive species in the understory as a result of treating the site as a yard waste site for a number of years, there is evidence of an underlying historic community, plant community that's evident there, as well as significant components of arbutus and big leaf maple, and Douglas, as well as within a larger forest dominated by Douglas fir. So this existing community reflects a sort of archetypal hillside rain shadow ecosystem that guides us as we go forward with the planting design. Also fundamental to the landscape design, and we'll see in a moment, is the integration of green infrastructure as a feature that really unifies the gathering spaces and communal areas. So what we've tried to do, working with the civil engineering team, is to capture rainwater in rain gardens and convey that water in bioswales, exposing the natural functioning of the urban ecosystem, and harnessing the human development to create a lush living environment that people can enjoy. Some of the key features of the landscape design that really amplify the convergence of topography, natural ecosystems, and urban development include these various overlook decks that are situated strategically near these green infrastructure elements, walking trails, gathering spaces throughout the forest that create a feeling of immersion within the forest that remains, as well as communal areas and private spaces for people to play, to picnic, to walk their dog, what have you. So Glenn, on that page, you can see, looking at the site plan, as you enter in, what is at the bottom of the page, sort of south, your first sort of point of orientation would be this central rain garden and overlook deck, represented by the number 1 there. We also envision sort of wayfinding signage welcoming you to the neighborhood and directing you within that development. There's a communal lawn space capitalizing on what is pretty much the only flat portion of the parcel. So that's where the number 2 is located, at the south as well. There's a garbage enclosure that I understand is sort of not necessarily going to be there any further. So that allows for a potential increase in area of that communal space, which creates additional gathering areas for the community. And between the locations of 1 and 2, the central wetland rain garden and the communal area numbers 1 and 2, try to create that as a center, really, within the arrival point of this development. As you sort of meander down the road to the lower road, I guess, near between buildings 12 and 13, we've incorporated a sort of what we're calling a forest amphitheater. This is sort of the secluded, quiet, contemplative space where people can kind of feel really, honestly, quite immersed within a forest ecosystem, despite being proximate to significant urban development. Wandering, let's see, number 4, again, you start to see these repeating pattern of overlook decks. These are both on the west side. There's one at the low where Glenn is pointing, and then further up beside building 8, near buildings 2, 8, and 9, there's another overlook deck. These are these points of pause and outlook prospect as you sort of follow a walking trail that's been field fit to fit between trees, minimizing impact on the local sort of environment. Throughout the site, working, like I said, with the civil engineering team, we've incorporated rain gardens and bioswales, again, accentuating that relationship between human development and the natural world. And to help guide people throughout, we've incorporated a wayfinding where those trails meet roads at a sort of a terminus. Now, in feedback and dialogue with the city, with Glenn, with the owners, we're considering options to create stronger connections beyond the signage and wayfinding, directing people, and I understand that we're willing to work through that. So that's going to be very helpful. Okay, yeah, there. So Glenn's brought up a couple of images showing where those connections could potentially be situated, currently at a relatively conceptual level, but that's much clearer in front of building 8, I believe that is, or 9, sorry. So creating a much more direct connection to make that a more continuous path. Thanks, Glenn. The other thing that's really worth calling attention to here, I think we've done the best that we can within the constraints of the site in respecting the Nanaimo Parkway guidelines and the 35 meters of forested landscape between the parcel boundary and any development. So as you can see on you can see Nanaimo Parkway is written, there's a yellow line indicating the parcel boundary. The first dashed line is the character protection zone. No development is there. That's intended to preserve a forested look as you drive along the parkway. And then beyond that, a further distance, an additional 25 meters, totaling a total of 35 meters. That is a tree protection zone. So the only intervention you see there is is a path, and like I mentioned, that path would be field fit. It's the location is conceptual at this stage in nature, but the intent is to fit that between trees, not down trees, in order to accommodate that path. If you go to the next image, Glenn, thank you. On this, rather than delving into the rationale and precedents, just reflecting on the plant palette, if you scrutinize that palette, you'll see that the species that we're proposing here are truly reflective of the Douglas fir salal and arbutus Doug fir shore pine site series ecosystems of the coastal Douglas fir biogeoclimatic zone. There are complementary ornamental species where native species would not thrive, as per common practice, but fundamentally it is a landscape deeply inspired by the local ecosystem. What you'd see under those plant palette notes, if again you were to scrutinize, you would see that based on an area calculation, we're proposing over 10,000 understory plants, another over 1,600 plants to be populating the bioswales and rain gardens, and the species associated with that, sort of wetland species. And in terms of tree replacements, there's 452 trees proposed for the site, where the City of Nanaimo requirements require 215 as per the instructions we've received from the city. So doubling the number of trees required by the City of Nanaimo, more than doubling. So feel as though we are reflecting on this plant palette and those plant palette notes and the knowledge that there are over 450 trees proposed. I think that's exemplary of a restorative approach to this particular landscape. Next slide, please. What I really want to focus here, there's a couple of sections you can see that are showing cross sections through the rain garden and then the forest amphitheater. Not to dwell on those, other than to say that the character we're trying to evoke is that real sense of immersion within a lush, thriving ecosystem, either inspired by water or the local forest. So while this is conceptual and illustrative in nature, it does convey the intended character, which is to create a real juxtaposition from the developed to the natural. Next slide, Glenn, please. Thank you. And then just to wrap it up here, I'll suggest I don't need to go through every zoomed in portion in the landscape plan unless I'm asked to do so. Just in the interest of time, what I'd like you to focus on centrally, you can see a parking area. And adjacent to that parking area, what are sort of graphic examples of boulders signifying a kind of a rocky outcropping. So rather than sort of monumental concrete retaining walls, we've opted for retaining walls that are reflective of the rocky outcroppings that you would currently find in this kind of environment. Again, punctuated by arbutus and other species conventionally or naturally found on a rocky outcropping. Again, I think illustrative also of the high density of trees that we're proposing for the area following development. And finally, I know that there's been discussion regarding the parking and just ensuring that any excess parking, particularly in these at their sort of street level parking, is to incorporate sort of permeable paving options to ensure that rainwater does get infiltrated and return to the natural sort of systems. Again, here's an illustrative sort of concept provided by Glenn, showing some of those areas where we would envision some of that permeable parking. I think that probably covers the landscape adequately. Hopefully I haven't spoken for too long. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chris. I'll jump in here now as well. I'm Drew Bardouin. I'm with Newcastle Engineering. I'm the civil engineer for the project. I'll just speak really briefly on a couple of points. First, just to follow up on what Glenn had talked about regarding the roads. The two main internal access roads were cited, as Glenn indicated, to kind of make the most use of the limited, level area on the site and try and contour along so as to provide, the most access to building areas while minimizing the amount of grading needed. Hence just the single T intersection to try and reduce the amount of space needed for roadworks. We also kept the lanes, to a minimum width, again, to reduce the amount of grading that would be required on the steep slope. On the stormwater side, Chris touched on some of the kind of the surface features that we'll be using. This site is tributary to the Millstone River, and as such, it triggers the city's requirements for both retention and detention on the site to mitigate the post-development flows and keep those at the pre-development levels. And also, as always, there's the stormwater quality requirements for any waters discharging. So in order to meet those requirements, we have a bit of a mix of, landscape source control features, such as the rain gardens and the bioswales, as well. In order to make up some of that volume control that we need, we will be looking to have a conventional in-ground detention tank just to provide that required storage capacity to make up that pre and post development flows. I do want to point out with the bioswales that run kind of along the north side of the building, I guess the south side of the tree protection bylaw, we had a deliberate effort there between ourselves and landscape to come up with a design that will both meet those stormwater criteria, as well as trying to, as Chris indicated, maintain that flow of water in the ground and keep water infiltrating so that we can ensure that there's always water being reintroduced into that tree protection zone, so that in the long run they have that maintained surface water. So between the conventional rain gardens and bioswales, we'll be meeting our water quality objectives. The rain gardens and the bioswale and the detention tank all combined to give us that mitigation of flow, so that detention requirement that the city is looking for. So I think I will leave it there unless anybody has specific questions, but we have found the room on this site in order to make sure we can meet the city requirements for tributary to the Millstone. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. That's hopefully wraps up our presentation, and we're happy to hear some comments and questions, and happy to answer anything that we can.
Great, thanks, Glenn and team. That's a nice, thorough presentation. If you can stop sharing your screen, and then I can see everybody here. See what we have. Okay. Yeah, now, first of all, does any of the committee members have questions for staff? Now, I think, Angela, you had one, so if you want to go ahead now.
Yes, through the chair to staff. I just was curious, with this zoning and regulations around it, would it permit bed and breakfasts to occur in these units?
Let me just check the zoning bylaw. So like short-term vacation rentals?
Or yeah, that, or however the city deals with that short-term vacation rentals or bed and breakfast.
Yes, so under the R10 zone, short-term vacation rentals are permitted under the R10 zone.
Okay. Okay. That's all I had.
Kevin, you've got a question?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Christine, you hinted at the applicant possibly having a need for some variances, and the applicant said they did not have any variances. Can you shine any light on that?
Yes, so there has been a, I would say, partial redesign. So there were initially some variances, and potentially over time, I think Glenn could probably speak more to what they've done. It was height and some setback variances as well, and those have been reduced. So we have had some conversations with a reduction of variances for the setbacks, and the applicant has gone ahead and denied as well on their end.
Now, was that the change that was made to in the addendum? Because I wasn't quite clear on what had changed. I read through it, but Glenn, maybe you could.
Referral process and the review that Christine was conducting with staff. We identified some areas where we could work harder to make the project more appropriate. So we had some variances on the building setbacks, the property line setbacks. We re-identified the property lines and worked with planning to ensure that front yard was front yard, flanking side yard. It is a bit of a tricky site because we have Tralee Road, which is really a path, and then Adderley Road, which doesn't have any sort of dedication yet. And so it was our interpretation of property lines that caused a bit of work that we had to redo, which we were able to do. And then the height, we came as part of just wanting to further investigate how we were best going to place the buildings. We actually changed the buildings. Christine identified a correction that we needed to make in the density as well. So through that, we actually reduced the number of units down to 71, and we're able to create a different unit type, which actually ends up being, I feel, more beneficial to the project overall. So the addendum that was added was probably my revised design rationale, which explains, basically the form and character, but eliminates the requests for those variances. So the revised drawing package is illustrative of the work that has happened between our design team and city planning staff to kind of further progress through the design.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Helps to clarify that. So any other questions of staff? No? Okay. Angela, would you like to start off there?
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just like to thank Glenn and Chris for your presentations, as well as Christine. I can see there's an immense amount of work that's gone into this project so far. And I'm happy to be here to maybe help out a little bit. So I just, the reason I had the question about the bed and breakfast or vacation homes is just based on the parking. Because I can see that most of the units have flex spaces in there. And I'd anticipate that maybe some of these units would use that flex space as a Airbnb, B&B or vacation rental space, or student housing. So with that, I would support the additional parking spaces, just because it's probably inevitable that these spaces will be used somewhat for those reasons, and there will be additional vehicles external to the family that lives there. So I would support the additional parking spaces for those reasons. In terms of the site, in terms of community amenity, I did sort of feel that some sort of flex space for the development might be a nice addition to this sort of community. It's pretty tight, but if, maybe if that garage or garbage enclosure was to be removed, maybe that might create some space in there for a small flex space that could be used for community groups, daycare, block watch, neighborhood associations, just something where people could congregate communally. As far as the buildings, building form, I do really like the color palette. It's buildings are contemporary and very sort of sleek and modern. The only thing that sort of stood out was the roof lines being so similar and within the same direction. There's not a lot of variation going on there, so I really sort of like even the renderings from the street looking to it, just there's a lot of this sort of pointing up in the same direction. So just looking through the steep slope guidelines, there is some mention on roof lines being perpendicular or at least in the same slope as the terrain. And I don't know if that's possible to do something like that here, because it looks like some of the roof lines are with the grade and some are against the grade. So I don't know how it might be feasible to maybe make the roof lines less sharp or aggressive, but that might be something that would be in line with the steep slope guidelines that could be helpful in sort of softening those roof lines. On the roof line topic, there's a lot of, it appears that there'd be a lot of solar option here. So I'm just thinking that if you were to integrate green infrastructure into the buildings, I don't know if there's the ability or if it's cost prohibitive, or just even retrofitting it so that the ability is there to have solar panels. I'm just going to put that out there. I don't know the feasibility of it, but I think it would be a great contribution to this development if it could have some kind of solar component to it. Let's see here. And do agree with staff with just having some variation in the coloring. It looks like some of the renderings look very similar in coloring, but others do appear that they will be varied. So maybe just a little bit more variation with entryways or color palette materials might be break it up a little bit. And the landscaping, what can I say? The landscaping's pretty impressive, very comprehensive. I didn't know that it was being used as a waste site, so sounds like even though there's gonna be lots of building, there'll be a lot of improvement as well. So that's great. I was questioning the walkway just being all the way along this steep slope, and actually the safety aspect of that. I don't know what kind of safety precautions are going to be considered for this, but I wasn't so sure that having a walkway at the top of a major slope might be great in a residential setting with families. I certainly wouldn't want my 6-year-old to be walking along there, just hanging around the neighborhood. So just in contemplating that, it appears that there's quite a bit of hardscape associated with that. And I love the platforms, the viewing platforms. However, it appears there'll be quite a bit of maintenance associated with all these stairs going up the steep slope and moving through the walkway. And then moving across into this hooked parcel, additional walkway. And I'm just wondering if there might be an opportunity, because this is an existing public trail here along Tralee, and a park adjacent to it. And I didn't know that if maybe some of the efforts being put into the walkway could be translated into enhancing this hooked piece to be connected to this other park. If what I'm getting at is maybe there's opportunities to look at this hooked parcel to become essentially part of the park and enhance that space, potentially with trails and more walking spaces in there, sort of dog walking areas for safer for children and families, especially because it's connected to this other park and this public trail, which also leads down to Westwood Trails, just down the way. It just seems like a better pedestrian connection and park trail connection with this being enhanced as a park, which connects to Westwood, versus putting efforts into a trail all the way around this site. And I don't know if it's far past the parkland donation, but maybe that piece is suited as a parkland to be donated to the city, but that might be well beyond the conversation at this point. So anyway, I just had those thoughts. It may be, again, too far gone into the process to consider this, but I thought it was important to bring that up. So that's that. And yeah, that's all I had for today. Thank you very much, and wonderful project. I hope it happens quickly.
Thanks, Angela. Okay, Kevin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Glenn, Chris, and Drew, for your presentation. Obviously, a very difficult site, but I think what you're proposing is something that's going to do quite well. Obviously, because of the views, these type of units are in demand, and I think what you're proposing here, it's spot on, really, what's needed for I think this neighborhood. With respect to siting, I think Glenn, the way you handled the siting of this project, with the roads going parallel to the slope of the topography, is pretty much really the only way you can really do it. So I think you did really good with that. Starting with, I guess, the parking, I agree with Angela. I think even though you do have extra parking, a lot of these units have single garages without driveways long enough to support a vehicle. And with your Glenn, with your formula for your calculation for parking, did you factor in that a lot of these driveways, especially the downsloping lots, have driveways that you can't park vehicles in?
We're able to take advantage of longer driveways. The grade was set so that it could be used as a parking space, and just by way of a kind of a token addition to our design, we inserted a standard parking stall dimension, and we kept the grade within the City of Nanaimo's parking bylaw. So a number of those driveways provide part of the additional parking. You'll notice in building 9 and some of 8 and most of 10, we tried to place additional parking there so that could be convenient enough for people. The assigned, it's not necessarily assigned, but it's parking that's going to be close enough to the units that don't have the opportunity of a full driveway apron. So that was kind of one of the drivers for us, citing the parking within the development and the buildings, the clustered buildings.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some challenges there, but in your formula for your parking, especially in 9, 10, 11, and 12, where virtually there's no driveway parking whatsoever, and they're all single garages. So none of those units, for all those units in 9, 10, 11, and 12, you only calculated for one parking stall for each of those. Is that correct?
No.
At least in addition to what you provided with the little parking areas.
Yeah, so the additional parking areas make up the overall parking count on the site. Yes, but those units that you mentioned, there is a dedicated single car garage, and then the second required stall for the development parking count would be located in the areas that are around building 9 and between 8 and 7. The same goes for building 13. We tried to cluster some additional parking that was outboard of the unit in order to kind of create a bit more convenience for in the event that 2 cars were going to be used for one particular unit.
So those parking areas outside, like the parking areas like between 7 and 8 and between 11 and 12, those stalls will be assigned to individual units then?
I think through the as we go through the development, I would assume that there would probably need to be some reserved outside parking that would be assigned to the strata unit, just as part of making it pretty obvious that those stalls are reserved for the units that are close by. We still have the appropriate amount of visitor parking and accessible parking to meet all of the additional conditions for the City of Nanaimo's bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
So really the additional parking largely comes in the form of these driveway aprons that are in front of the upslope buildings and the ones in front of building 1 and 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. So, but not necessarily, they would be a driveway. And if through sort of the development of the strata plan, I think I would assume that there would be some need to assign parking for the units that don't have their longer parking strip, just so that it's pretty obvious to a potential buyer that you have your stall in your garage, and as close as we could make it, here's another stall that would be associated with the unit. But again, I don't want to speak on behalf of the developer and how they plan to work up the strata plan, but it's certainly something that needs to be considered.
Because obviously the challenge is that you have 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units here, and so you're talking normally families. You're not normally talking at least 2 vehicles per family, and in an area of the world where most people don't use the garage for parking, they use it for storage. And if you have a house that big and with kids,
have a lot of stuff in it.
Yeah, you're going to have the garage won't be used for parking. So I think that's going to be a real challenge. It's obviously going to be a challenge for the people living there, and hopefully they're aware of that, and hopefully there isn't concerns. But definitely I would recommend that you do not reduce any of the parking stalls, just as Angela mentioned. It was mentioned about pedestrian links through the site, and you've mentioned a little bit about that, or at least Chris did. And I think anything you could do to improve and just put a little bit more work into the pedestrian links through the site and access to the trails, I think that's something that I think probably needs to be done just to make it a little bit easier. What do you plan to do with the stone walls, the retaining walls? Are there stone outcroppings too? Or just are you putting in stone retaining walls? I'm not sure if that's for Glenn or for you, for Chris.
Chris, you want to start?
Sure, I can start. Well, there is evidence of rocky outcroppings on the site, and just by virtue of the natural topography. So what we imagine, right, is that through the process of clearing and excavation, that we would be able to expose some of that to the extent that we can, and use natural native rock from on site to build that up, and just really trying to be reflective of that local ecology. So
you'd be open to providing like cascading plants or climbers.
There are some indigenous plants that could be cascading plants. Kinnikinick is a natural choice to cascade along with honeysuckle, I suppose. Also within the crevices along the rocks to be fitting in ferns. Again, just trying to, you don't typically see cascading plants over a naturally occurring rocky outcropping, right? Yeah. So that's kind of the perspective we were aiming for, but I mean, we would absolutely consider ground covers that can function in that manner.
You can do a lot with the outcroppings just by power washing them and even putting lighting on them to identify them a bit more. But in areas, especially on some of the taller stone walls, I think if you can look at adding some cascading plants on there, that would be good. With respect to the common refuse, I agree with Angela. If it's not needed, if you're going to go private with your pickup for all the refuse, obviously using that space for amenity space is something that I think you could probably, Chris, do a lot with that space to make it work quite well. So that would be something as well I'd like to see. Chris, for site lighting, it's pretty much all just going to be bollard lighting?
That's correct. Yes, bollard, low level
lighting,
compliant, sort of downward directed, that kind of approach.
Okay, and I'm glad Drew was here because I did have some questions regarding stormwater that he answered. And all I would say, Chris, is I like your material palette and the density. I like your mix of evergreen and deciduous trees. I think what you provided is really nice, and so a good job there. With form and character, I agree with Angela. The repetition of some of those roof planes, it's really noticeable on your cover rendering that shows how you drive into the site from Montclair onto Adderley, and the downsloping units where you have all those roofs going the same direction. I have the same concern about that, and also with Angela's comment regarding solar panels, if you did turn some of them to, which would like 90 degrees to have the slopes pick up more of a southerly direction to have solar panels, I think that's something that you might want to look at. I'm not sure, Glenn, did you look at that at all?
Not necessarily the solar ready or solar panels. However, the real challenge that we have is our townhome units are narrow and deep in their plan. Turning those roofs around to kind of create pitches that slope up with the hill does a couple of things. Because we've turned roofs 100 ways from Sunday on this thing, but what we've done is if we turn them, we end up losing the required percentage of 412 slope in order for us to have the 9-meter height for buildings and within the R10. If we go to a flat roof or a different kind of roof, we end up with a 7-meter height. So we needed, we kind of take those pitches and use them in order to kind of generate it's basically the building mass within the maximum required height. So we may be able to do an exercise where we turn them 90 degrees for the front, but we would need to do something else. So either that, or we go to an entirely different roof pitch, which we may run into other kind of practical construction constraints with.
I understand the 412 roof pitch, but for each building, you basically have an averaging method for your height, and you have a maximum height line. And when you show it in some of the ones, your highest unit, you quite often on each building, you quite often have done a different type of roof direction And all the ones that are below it, you can probably look at other alternatives because you're going to be below that height line. But also another option that you can consider is even like a butterfly roof too. And that way you can probably still maintain a 412 roof pitch. But all I would say is maybe just look at that and see if there's any anything you can do. I like the materials. I like the material choice, colors. I think you did very well there. And if did you look at any methods to maybe individualize the units, because all the buildings are pretty much the same, whether there's ways to vary the colors of the numbers on the door, numbers of the units or whatever. Did you look at anything like that, or did you want to go with the same palette throughout?
Yeah, we actually, there was one or two of the elevations. I think because I sort of burned through them pretty quickly, there is an intent to replace the light colored stucco with a gray panel over the roof, and so that it's not the same rhythm of materials as you go down across the facade. We pick a light up and replace it with a tan. We keep the wood look materials were at street level or at that sort of human sidewalk level, where we try to enrich everything with the stone cladding and the wood soffits, and then as we look up the building, the palettes of material kind of flip and flop as you go down. So we can certainly continue through the design to try and personalize these things and create those subtle features that give certainly, especially when you get into a 7-plex townhome, it would be nice. I agree to have at least a bit of a palette that says, "Oh, this is mine."
Yes, yeah. It's something I think I don't mind that, especially because of the quality of the materials. I don't mind what you've done, and I like the black fascias and the dark colors and the contrast between the light color and the dark. I think that works very well. And it's not going to take much to personalize each unit to make them a little bit more individualized. So other than that, I think you and your team have done a great job. So well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Tony?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Very creative project. Excellent market choice for townhouses, especially with the numbers of bedrooms. Very, very desirable. So congratulations on that. On that note, this is obviously going to be geared towards families, and I wasn't clear on what site amenities you had specifically tailored to kids. I'm thinking tot lots or playgrounds, that kind of thing. So that was one item. I think that the overall form and character, the colors, the variety, and all that kind of stuff, the architecture was excellent. I do have a little bit of concern about the repetitive roof nature that everybody's commented on, so I won't elaborate on it, but if you can do a little more variety or something, or simplification, especially if there's a potential for solar paneling, then obviously that's a good thing. As far as the parking, regardless of how many units are going to need a second stall, there's definitely going to be a need for visitor parking here, and your comment about keeping them off the public streets and so forth is well taken, and that's something that the Strata group is going to have to manage for themselves over time, and I'm sure they will, because they have no choice. My one concern, well, two actually, a minor one, is the simple length of that lower driveway. It's just a straight run. It looks like about a mile long. I'm exaggerating, obviously. I just wonder whether you couldn't mitigate that slightly so it wasn't quite so deadly looking. Either some paving treatment, periodic swaths of a different texture, color, or something like that. But a little more dramatically, if there's any way that halfway down or so you could introduce a little bit of a crank to the driveway, a slight bend or a curve or something similar to the upper driveway. I think you have the room on the site to do that, and it would just take the edge off so that you weren't looking straight down the entire length of it at any given spot. The only one thing that I had serious concerns about, and notwithstanding the the grade elevation differential between building 4 and 6 was just the proximity of that easternmost unit to the one immediately in front of it, or behind it, if you will. I just wondered if that unit could either be removed or perhaps redesigned and turned sideways to improve the space there, because I think the breathing space between those two units, even though they're considerable distance in height between them, it's going to be a deadly little space there, and I think it could stand some improvement. Otherwise, yeah, I think this is a great project, and I'm not going to reiterate what's already been said, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much. Great project.
Great, thanks, Tony. Okay, it's my turn to weigh in here. Find my notes. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for what I think is a great project, particularly because it's a multi-family project that includes many single-family homes with more than 3 bedrooms. I think this is much needed in the community, and I think the neighborhood is certainly appropriate for it. You're putting it in a single-family home neighborhood, but also meeting the city's aim to sort of increase density in certain areas, but in a sort of thoughtful way. And I think you've done that very well on a very difficult site, as well as it's already been mentioned. And I think you've handled that the best you can. There may be little tweaks that you can do, like Tony mentioned, with the drive aisle and that sort of thing, that will help. I think the form and character of the building, your materials, your palette, all of those go really well with the environment that it's set in. I think you've really tried to reflect that, and I really appreciate that. Again, I'll reiterate the roof line. It seems a little harsh, little bit too much. And I'm not an architect, so I don't know how to suggest anything. But I understand also your challenges in trying to deal with that in that sort of tight spot and with that number of units sort of crunched together. But if there's any way that you can soften that roof line a little bit or adjust it somehow to give it a bit of variation, that would help. Again, I reiterate my colleagues' comments on just the uniformity of the buildings. I do appreciate these kind of condo townhouses. It's a little hard to get away from. You tend to do that unless you add some really stark color, which doesn't fit with the form and character of this particular neighborhood. So you're kind of caught between those. So if there's little small things, the color of the door, some different numbers, or something that helps people to make sure they walk into the right unit, because I know if I lived in a place like this, I'd have a hard time remembering which one was mine. So again, I reiterate also the parking issues. I think in any home, whether it's just one family with 4 kids, they're gonna have 2 cars. So I have to agree with everybody on the parking issues there, and I'm happy to see that a lot of that, or as much of it as possible, you use some sort of porous materials, paving stones of some sort, just to mitigate the sort of hard surfaces. Speaking of parking too, I was just noticing that the parking lot that you have between units 7 and 8, it seems to me, when I'm not sure, I'm not very good at judging the heights and everything, but if I look at it's sort of it creates a kind of horseshoe canyon in there. And I'm I would worry there about a noise with all the hard surfaces, the building, the stone wall, etc. So again, if the ground can be somehow grassed as well, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some things that you can do to reduce that sound, because I think of the 2 people living in those units and what they're going to hear every time a car starts up in there, or if somebody's standing down there talking, it's going to echo within that sort of chamber, just because of the heights of everything there. So I don't know if you thought of that, Glenn and Chris, at all.
No, but it is it is going to be one of those areas that we chip away at the rock, or that's the proposed approach, with significant planting then sitting on top, and whatever kind of planting that can soften up those edges, or that edge of the rock. Chris would be the expert in knowing how that is going to renaturalize over time, whether it's mosses start to form and that kind of thing. If we are in order to meet the design guidelines for any additional parking, I flashed up the little diagram where we were considering areas where that would need to be permeable paving. So this would fall within one of those zones that we would definitely want to be changing the finish out. And as Tony mentioned, that may be one of those moments where we have an opportunity to change the driveway surface so that it's not as monotonous as mentioned. So
Yeah, it just might help. And some of the suggestions Kevin had, as much as I like the idea of a rocky outcrop as a wall, again, it's just acoustically is going to be very echoey, I would think. So any planting on that might help to mitigate that a bit. Just a suggestion there. Otherwise, I think the landscape, I think you've done a wonderful job with the landscape plan. I like the idea of the trails wandering around. And yes, there'll probably be some dangerous points there, but you guys have to take that into account. I thought it looked like it kind of created a bit of a circuit around the property. And if you can connect to other trails, wonderful. If other people in the neighborhood can walk through those, it's, great place to exercise or move around. And I like the idea of adding the little lookouts and so on, taking advantage of that view. So a very thoughtful plan. And I think there was, Tony mentioned he didn't see anything for children, but I think there was a playground in there, wasn't there? Or some sort of, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thanks. I know Kate would want me to address the question of play. So, I mean, there is a sort of an understanding that the value of access to nature for children. So maybe more nature-based kind of play rather than a taught log or a structure. So more of that interactive nature. I will also mention that just down Montclair Drive, I believe there is a playground there. I seem to recall. I don't want my feet held to the fire on that, but I feel like I recall that in some of the neighborhood context views that we did. Appreciate that, but I mean, I think the decks, the trails, the continuity, and the communal spaces really provide a reasonable opportunity for a different type of play. Sort of.
Yeah, no, I'm not even suggesting that a formal playground, more of at least a place where kids can climb around a bit.
Yeah, I hope to think that we've accommodated that. Maybe as we get into deeper details, they'll be a little more evident, but I think that aspect of play was certainly intended.
Yeah, great.
There is also we did do a little bit of a placeholder for the R1 parcel, in addition to the sort of the pathway connectors through the R10 site. The idea was to leave the R1 parcel as natural as possible. Mm-hmm. And in Chris's plan, he's indicated a little overlook deck and a potential walking trail to be able to navigate through that R1 parcel, which we're not touching at all. So that that sort of lends itself, I think, to one of Angela's comments as well, that R1 site is sort of bisected by the trail, and that may be an opportunity for that sort of kid safe play in the forest moment to happen. So it's the kids are going out to play. It's like go up to the park, don't go down to the bottom of the cliff, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Anyway, I think it's illustrated quite well in Chris's landscape site plan.
Yeah. Okay. And then my final comment, and this is something I have to say with the city, and I don't fault you guys at all because you have to do this, but I looked on your plan and you have bike racks sort of for general use in I think 2 places on the whole site. And I still don't understand why the city requires these in a development like this, because first of all, if I rode my bike up there, I would ride up to my friend's house and park my bike outside their house. And if I was worried about security, I'd have the bike put in the garage. I would not lock it up, half a block away on a public bike rack. It sort of doesn't make any sense. I've seen a couple developments come through this committee since I've been on it, where I know they've had to put them in there, and it sort of seems pointless. So anyway, that's my little statement for today. So Kevin's kind of laughing. Okay, so I appreciate you have to have them there, and commend you on it. So, okay, that's it for my comments. I just want to thank you very much for all your work on that. So I think we need to consider some, we have a number of recommendations here, and I just need to go over them with our committee and see what we're formally going to end up with. So just what I see here is consider ways to soften or change the angle of the roof line. Consider an outdoor flex space. Now, Angela, did you want that as a recommendation in there? Or is there enough outdoor flex space, especially with that R1 property?
Could you repeat that? I was trying to get your attention, so I wasn't quite listening.
Okay, sorry.
Before you start the recommendations, I just overlooked a point that I intended to make earlier. It was to do with the glazing of the decking. And I don't really understand the CMHC requirements for acoustics. I tried to look them up, and it was just like, no. So I guess because staff had commented maybe to remove the upper deck. Is that correct? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
So I was just I'd be disappointed to see the upper deck go, only because these are townhomes that don't have their own private yard space, and having an upper deck and a lower deck provides seasonal outdoor space. So you have the exposed deck for sunny days, and then you have the lower deck that most of the time of the year we need covered deck space if we want to barbecue or hang out outside. So I really feel like maybe there's another opportunity to deal with the acoustics and the glazing, and maybe there's maybe it's something to do with the materiality of the upper deck rather than having glass. I can see that, I don't know if the glazing is a problem for reflection from other points in the city, but if that is a concern, the glazing part, then maybe it's just looking at different materialities versus removing the deck completely.
Perhaps Christine could just explain what the concern is there, maybe.
Yes. So there are recommendations from the CMHC to the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, and those sort of specify a range for recommended decibel limits. And in the case of very specific buildings on this property, the noise, which I would assume comes from the Nanaimo Parkway, is higher than the recommended 55 decibel limit. And so, we're looking at ways to mitigate that. And generally speaking, those upper decks are going to be the ones that are going to be the higher receiving points for those louder outside noises, just because they're up above the trees, which would provide a natural sort of deafening element. So that was where sort of that recommendation came in, or that consideration.
Okay. Kevin?
Yeah, just to jump in on that, for this particular project, CMHC doesn't have any rulings on this project. Is that correct? It's just the building code and local bylaws, correct?
Yeah, so this is a recommendation. So the Nanaimo Parkway guidelines ask us to look at those recommendations, and that's where those considerations come from.
Okay, thank you. And just so I agree with Angela, these are view lots, and most of those rooms are master bedrooms. That again, I feel that if I had a unit like that, I would want to have a balcony up there.
Well, and I would think that when people buy that, they're going to purchase it with the full knowledge that there's noise from the highway. So it's something either they're going to adjust to or decide not to buy there too. So, yeah. Okay. So back to the recommendations. Does anybody else have any comments they want to make? Okay. So I was just asking you, Angela, about the outdoor flex space. Do you want that as a recommendation, or just leave that? Because they were talking about, Glenn was talking about that R1 property, which sounds like a flexible space too. Is that what you were thinking of?
I don't know if I want to say recommendation, but I would feel that it'd be important to consider an indoor community space.
Oh, indoor, you were talking.
Yeah, that was what I was my
Okay.
intention for that one. The outdoor space on the R1 zone portion was what I was talking about in terms of like, rather than having the full walkway around, just putting more efforts into developing that as a sort of more outdoor amenity space. And where the garbage enclosure would be potentially an indoor amenity space, if there's space for it there.
Oh, okay.
Or if it makes sense there, it could be somewhere else on the site, but some, consideration of some sort of community amenity indoor space,
Like
flex space. Yeah. A gathering space.
Okay, so consider an indoor amenity space. Consider more variation in the palette of the exterior finishes. Consider ways to incorporate solar panels. Consider trail links to the park and public trails. Consider adding cascading plants on the rocky outcrops. Consider eliminating the garbage enclosure and using that for alternate amenity space, indoor or out. Maybe we can combine that with your comment.
Or somewhere else, somewhere on the space. That was just a thought.
Yeah. And then I wasn't too clear on the driveway comment that you made, Tony. You're talking about the drive aisle going into the complex, and you were wanting to see something a little having a less.
Yes, I'm talking about the unmitigated length of the lower driveway on the site. It's a straight run of several hundred meters. I'm not quite sure, but it looked pretty deadly. And I think at the very least, the surface perhaps could be broken up with various treatments. But more meaningfully, if there's a way of introducing a slight curve or a bend to it, similar to the upper driveway, it might just take the edge off that sort of unmitigated length of it. I don't think this is a deal breaker. I think it's just something to be considered. I think if the way to mitigate it would be an improvement to the project if it can be done. That's all.
Okay, so consider ways to vary the lower driveway with surface treatments or adding curves.
Something like that.
Okay. And then the second comment you made about the 2 units, I missed that. Wasn't too sure how would you phrase, if you want to make that a recommendation.
Well, I think I would just ask for the applicant to give further consideration to the spacing between buildings 4 and 6, I think it was, to improve the proximity and overlook and something along that line. They're very, very close, and one's a full story above the other at least, and it's not going to be a comfortable juxtaposition, in my opinion. So.
Okay. So consider ways to spacing.
Just to improve the proximity of buildings 4 and 6.
Buildings 4 and 6.
I think from Glenn's nodding, I think he understands what I mean.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we have to have something for the minutes, so okay, that sounds good.
All right.
Okay, so let me see, I think I've narrowed it down to quite a few here. So there's actually 9, and our committee should decide if we want to just leave them on. So I'll read through them again. Consider ways to soften or change the angle of the roof lines. Consider an indoor amenity space, but I'm thinking we could probably just combine that with eliminate garbage enclosure if possible, and use space as an outdoor or indoor amenity space. Would that be appropriate, Angela? Because it's changing what you recommended. Your mic.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to tie it to the garbage enclosure, but that was just a side note that if it wasn't going to be there, maybe that's a space that could be used as an amenity. So
Okay.
maybe,
Yeah, I'll leave it then, just to eliminate garbage enclosure, leave that as a separate one.
yeah, I think they're planning on doing it anyhow, but
Yeah. Okay. Yes, okay, so consider an indoor amenity space, consider more variation in the palette of the exterior finishes, consider ways to incorporate solar panels, consider trail links to park and public trail, add cascading plants on rocky outcrops, consider eliminating the garbage enclosure, consider ways to vary the lower lower driveway with surface treatment or adding curves, consider ways of improving the proximity between buildings
4 and 6.
4 and 6. Yeah.
There was one other one. I'm not sure if it's one that was added to the palette recommendation regarding the individualizing and personalizing of the entryways for the units.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So we'll do another one in there. Consider individualizing.
Do we not consider numbers adequate? I mean, most places that's all you need. A number, everybody can read a number. Do we need to actually incorporate?
It depends on how the numbers are done. If they're just small numbers, it appears that they might be putting larger numbers on. And if that's the case, that might be enough to individualize them. But sometimes it's just a matter of just adding a small little accent color treatment or something to them. But if nobody else is concerned about it, I'll remove it. But it's something, when there's this many units, I think it's something that I would like to see personally, but that's just me.
Well, how about consider more variation in palette of exterior finishes to help individuate individual units? Would that work, Kevin, to combine that?
You individualize the units?
Yeah.
Okay.
Better individualize the units. That sort of hits both of them. Okay. So that's in total then 9 recommendations. And any more discussion on those recommendations? No? Okay. So if I could have a motion to recommend the development project as presented with those recommendations. Tony?
So moved.
Moves, and Angela seconded. So, and carried. So all in favor, sorry. Yes, okay. All in favor, and it's carried. So that's it. Thank you, and appreciate your work on that project, and see you next time.
Yes, thank you all for your considerations, and again, thanks to the design team that was here today to present.
Great, thanks.
Okay, take care.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're ready for our second presentation. Again, this time, again, introduced by Christine Mays for a property at 1588 Boundary Crescent.
Perfect. I don't know if
Everybody here?
the applicants want to come. I know Donna's here. Igor, I think, if you wanted to turn your cameras on. Drew, are you with this project as well?
I am.
Awesome. Great. Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. So development permit application DP 1277 is a 5-story mixed-use building comprised of a restaurant, and that's located on the ground, mezzanine, and second levels, and 12 one-bedroom units, which are located on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th stories. The subject property is zoned Hospital Urban Center, so that's our CC5 zone, and is designated secondary urban center, often known as the Hospital Urban Center in the city plan. It is located across the street from the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital and is presently undergoing a 2-lot subdivision. The proposed development is proposed to occur on future lot A. And it's part of a larger redevelopment of the area, which is to create a hospital area campus, medical offices, and complementary services. Subject property encompasses existing commercial buildings and a parking lot. So this particular property falls within development permit area 8, and that's form and character. And the general design permit area design guidelines apply to that proposed development. There is one proposed variance, which is associated with this proposal, and that seeks to reduce the required number of parking spaces from 72 to 0. And then I'm sure the applicants can sort of walk through what they're doing with their parking. And I will pass it along back to you, Madam Chair, and if anyone has questions after the presentation.
Great. Who's presenting here?
Donna Hayes. I'm sorry, I can't turn on my video. It says the host has stopped my video link.
Oh,
Same with me.
Hold on, sorry.
Igor Narva.
Okay.
there we go.
Oh, there I am. There I am.
All right. Well, go ahead, Donna. You can share your
Great.
screen anytime.
Thank you. So my name is Donna Hayes. We are the project manager for this project as well as the owner of the development. Thank you to Miss Maisie for introducing our project, and actually thank you to her for coming out a few weeks ago to walk through the project with myself. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the hospital campus and what has actually been happening. We've probably spent the last 20 years investing in the hospital campus. Our latest investment would have been the Colville Medical Center, which you see directly across the street from the hospital, which incorporates our 208 parking space parkade, which we built and completed in April of 2021. The campus itself is meant to integrate various services that are to aid in providing healthcare through our tertiary hospital. So I'm not certain how much you know about what's going on with the hospital and the proposed tower that's to come and the proposed cancer center. And I could go on at length as I'm the community liaison for tertiary care for the Nanaimo Hospital for everything north of the Malahat. But we have been busy building infrastructure that supports that growth and development of the hospital, which is necessary to service the 450,000 people we service at Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. There are several special considerations when we look at the campus, and our last addition was specifically medical offices, and we did have a coffee shop and a pharmacy on that main floor. The next proposal is, and we are in for subdivision and have an approved PLA to subdivide off a very small portion of Hospital Commons. Hospital Commons is the 2 parcels of land that where you see the Windward Pub, and actually currently my office is, the hospital lab is here, our kidney care facility is here. And it's hard to tell that it's actually 2 parcels, but it currently houses 4 buildings. Our proposal is to demolish one of the buildings, which used to be home to the TD Bank. It's currently home to UK Moves, who's one of our tenants here. One of the things that may not be evident when driving by this parcel or these 2 parcels of land is that all the buildings currently are actually 2 stories. Due to the grade difference when you go through the intersection at Boundary and Dufferin, we actually have a lower parking lot area, which services our offices, which are down below. And then our entrance off of Boundary services our offices, which are on the 2nd floor. So everything is currently already 2 stories on this site. Our proposal on our new portion of land is to create a mixed use building, which is to add some ancillary services that we don't currently have in the hospital area. And that's to add a 200-seat restaurant along with 3 stories of residential units. They are 12 one-bedroom units, which are specifically geared to locums and nursing staff and residents who are coming to work at the hospital. As our hospital grows, we're going to become more of a teaching hospital and expand our opportunities out to the university in terms of a medical school. And right now, the need for housing for the people who are working there is critical. It's hard to get residents when we can't give them anywhere to live, or to bring in locums and specialty surgeons when we can't give them anywhere to live. So the idea here is to provide 12 one-bedroom units that will be specifically geared to the campus itself. The 200-seat restaurant is to answer our desperate need for food. And yes, the Windward Pub will be permanently closing, which is on the other parcel of land, which forms Hospital Commons. That other side, and the reason when you look at our development, there's lots A, which would be this new building, lot B, which is the building that currently houses my offices and my Island Health tenants, who are the lab, communicable diseases, and kidney care. And lot C, which is the separate lot, which will be, is planned for future development actually for our medical hotel, which will be going there. which will be specifically geared to when our cancer center moves to Nanaimo. And as our hospital tower expands, we're in desperate need of hotel rooms for the people who are being sent here for care. So that's a future development. But we need to let you know that up front because it explains the reason for what's going on with parking. We intentionally developed Colville Medical Center first. We intentionally invested $8 million into a freestanding 5-story, 208 parking space parkade. And that's because the campus is specifically to work as a whole. Each building, while they independently answer a need within the campus, they actually all function together. So for instance, the concept of the campus is you come to one place, you park in one place, but you get all of your medical services here, which includes stopping for lunch or going to our coffee shop to get a coffee while you're the driver of your parent to see the doctor. So a part of our plan with this development is that we'll be using the parking, obviously at the parkade, which is directly next door. Until the hotel is built, the hotel actually proposes 2 stories of parking below grade. So it will also be adding, and you'll see under our notes when it's actually completely developed out, this site will meet all of its requirements for its own parking. It's a comprehensive plan and the sort of the next step in moving forward with the campus and to answer the needs that are required here. We've had several meetings with engineering because the intersection at Dufferin and Boundary is complicated. It's complicated because of its grade changes as it goes around our property. It's complicated because as we look at new guidelines for the complete street, we need to add an ambulance into that conversation. And our hospital sees multiple ambulances on a daily basis because we are the emergency room and that intersection's the access point for that. It's also complicated by the fact that we're in a helidrome. So we have to accommodate emergencies for helicopter access for the hospital. So our plans have already been sent off to Island Health, working with them with respect to Transport Canada in terms of how we take care of the helicopter that has to fly in and out. So as a note on that piece, maybe not a consideration on most projects. We found out the hard way in Colville is a consideration when you're on the campus because we have to, right now we don't have a cath lab. We have to fly all of our heart attack patients who need cath services to Victoria. So there are some complicating factors on this site. And that's why we proposed actually a small site and the structure that we have at our maximum height, although we are not seeking a height variance. I'm incredibly excited because I was part of the group that put together the neighborhood plan that talked about animation at the street. So not only is the restaurant inside 2 stories with the mezzanine, main floor and a mezzanine, it's actually 2 stories outside. So it has seating out at the sidewalk level, but it also has seating a story above as you walk around the building on the outside of the building. And that's part of what the intent of the neighborhood plan was when we worked on putting that together with city staff and with HANA, our hospital area neighborhood association, was to make sure we created some animation out at the street level and made it more interactive with people who are walking and biking in this area. Obviously, we have 2,500 people who work at the hospital across the street from us. We suspect as they have been at the Windward for the last number of years, they'll be a lot of our main clientele during the day, coming across the street to pick up lunches and whatnot. And it's not really necessarily relevant to this application, but because we're the owners of the property and because we're the chair of the hospital campus committee, we've made some requirements of what's going to happen in that restaurant. So you're going to see promotion of local beers and wines. We're going to see the ability to pick up lunches and take them with you, particularly for patients who are visiting someone in the hospital. There's going to be a little bit more scope and control over actually what happens in the restaurant so that we're actually addressing the needs of the hospital campus itself. So the building design and functionality has been driven in a large extent to what's needed at the campus. And as I ask Igor to take over and speak to the building, you'll notice several things, particularly as we talk through landscaping and some of our design. You'll see that we've added some of our walls with our landscaping around the perimeter. It's specifically been designed as seating because as we're on the campus, you'll notice that Colville Medical, Millstone Medical is also our building. We have a lot of outdoor seating. We We also have a bus stop directly in front of us, and bus transportation is critical to the success of the campus. A lot of patients can only get to the campus by bus. So we're trying to utilize our retaining walls as we walk down that street front for seating for people who are coming to take the bus, for instance. So we're trying to use some of those pieces that we've noticed as deficiencies in the past. Our little tiny bus stop that's there is not adequate for the number of people who actually ride our buses. We've also got bike storage. That is a critical conversation, to be quite frank, on the campus. Our last two builds have bike storage, and we do not have enough. All of our doctors and staff, a huge majority of them, ride their bikes here. So this building does have over 400 square feet of interior bike storage. We also notice a huge amount of our patients and a huge amount of our guests, for instance, use our coffee shop, are using bikes. So both of our current buildings and this building also proposes exterior bike storage for guests to the campus. It also proposes green spaces with lots of seating, because one of the things that we do know actually about our campus is that our exterior spaces are as important to our people who work on the campus as our interior spaces are. So you'll see we've got benches and whatnot, not only along our sidewalks, but we've got them inside the site as well. Those are specifically because we see people every single day using our exterior benches. So we've incorporated them wherever we can, over and above what we're proposing for our bus stop. So I'm going to ask Igor to walk us through the building itself and its form and character, please.
Okay, maybe I can share my screen, and that way everybody can see. Can everybody see my screen?
We can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Igor Nardin with OCA Architecture, and I am an architect at the AIBC. Donna's left me about a minute and a half, I think, so I'll speak quickly. We're here to present a mixed-use building at 1588 Boundary Crescent. The proposed building will house the relocated current restaurant, which has serviced the community for many years, as well as 12 residential units above. The site, as you can see, and I've added some markups just in case you're not, you should be familiar with the area, but just in case you're not.
You make the, excuse me, Igor, could you make the image full screen?
Sure.
Thanks.
That way I don't have to look at myself. Oh, I still can see myself. Oh,
yeah. Well. You'll be in the little.
Okay, no worries. The site, as Don mentioned, will be subdivided into two lots. A lot B, which is an L-shaped lot, and a lot A, which is the corner lot, which is the location of the proposal in front of you. Obviously, the corner of lot A has two streets, Dufferin Crescent and down below Boundary Crescent. Across the street from Dufferin, you have the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. To the west of lot A, you have Millstone Medical Center that was built, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago. And then to the east of lot B, you have the Colville Medical Center and the Parkade. This particular lot is, we've just designated these as letters for now, but this is lot C. And what I'd like to show you before we go a little too much further is what we have proposed. Again, this is just a study that was done with respect to what may happen on lot C. And as Donna mentioned, what we have is, and again, this was just a study in parking, so it's not going to be a massive asphalt thing, but it's basically gives you an idea of how we can accommodate the parking. So there'd be two levels of parking. There'd be a surface level, and then there'd be an underground level. And then essentially this is the shape of what we think the building may look like above. Okay, so it gives you an idea of what we have. With respect to lot A, because we're at the corner, lot B will eventually be the lot that has the two access points, one off Dufferin, one off Boundary. This lot is virtually impossible to have an access on it, let alone to have underground parking at this point. So the way we designed it is obviously we would retain the two existing access points that exist there now. When Lot C is developed, there would be another access put in, one off the laneway and one here. This whole site would operate as one site with respect to parking and also respect to loading. So what we provided, as Donna mentioned, this is the site slopes down to the east. So basically this upper level faces Boundary. The lower level actually faces the parking lot out back. So that's why Donna's saying all the existing buildings on the site are these two existing buildings. They're all 2-story. Okay, so basically access to the underground parking garage at that point will all take place off of Dufferin Street. And as we've shown, more or less where we think we have room to provide the loading spaces. So just jump quickly to the actual site. As I mentioned, it'll be right on the corner. There was quite a bit of land expropriated for this at this corner. The red line that you see here is actually our property line. This is where it was previously. The expropriation will house wider sidewalks, bike lanes. We've added in, we've discussed with the city about adding in green spaces within that space. There's a bus stop in this area. There's also what we've provided is more landscaping within the site. These areas already exist as part of Building B, but what we've done is we've added in more gathering spaces within the site. As you can see, there's virtually no parking on this lot per se. However, as I explained previously, as we develop Building C, that parking will come, so to speak. The other aspect is when you look at the stats, by adding the hotel, the parking load actually goes down, surprisingly, mainly because the medical buildings have a very high kind of parking load. The other thing that Donna mentioned is the actual medical use of this building does not have as many visitors as you would normally get in a medical building. However, it's more of an office building as opposed to a medical building. But I digress a little bit. In terms of the building and how it's situated, we pushed the building as far up against the corner as we possibly could, and by doing that, we were able to use a little bit of the setback area for landscaping, definitely softening the areas and so on around. There's pathways, there's a ramp down so that this is accessible to anybody. It also provides for resting areas, as Donna mentioned, and just sitting areas, just to take in the neighborhood and what's happening in the neighborhood. We also chose or tried to animate that corner a little bit more so than some of the other corners, actually the other 3 corners. Even Millstone, to some extent, has a few green spaces and so on, and it does have some seating and things like that. However, this one is much more of a space that I think people will use because mainly it's right beside the restaurant, it's right across from the hospital. So we tried to make it as welcoming as possible. The second floor or mezzanine level will, as Donna mentioned, really animate the space as well. I haven't shown on our renderings, we haven't shown any umbrellas and things like that, but I think that's what we see happening. Not to mention what we'd probably like to see the eventual restaurant tenant do is actually put some planting up on the mezzanine, have it cascade down over the walls and so on. So it really becomes more of a an animated corner, so to speak. The key, one of the key things that I wanted to just maybe I should go back to this one. Just want to explain some of the key entry points to this actual building. The southwest corner will be the actual entrance to the restaurant space, and adjacent to that, we have an outdoor patio that faces west. The residential upper floors will be accessed at this point within the site. There's an elevator here, stairwells, and so on, so they have their own little vestibule. And there is, you'll probably see this better, there's a lower area in this area here, which actually is access into the basement. And I'll show you on the rendering. It's a little harder to see here. It actually happens right here. And basically that will give the restaurant access for deliveries and so on, but it'll also give access to the basement level, which, as you will see, houses the, there's a prep kitchen in the basement that will do everything from baking goods to just, you know, just preparing things for the upper, for the restaurant on the upper floor. Again, this elevator will be used. There will probably be a dumbwaiter used in there as well. Again, the lower level will have the staff change rooms and washrooms for the restaurant staff as well. There's a residential storage area and a large bike room. Generally, with respect to cycling and so on, we've provided enough spaces for at least one bike per resident, for one thing. When it comes to accessing that, as I've just noted a few things, this would be the lower kitchen entry. There's a whole garbage area that we've provided here that is hidden from the street. And what I'm going to suggest is, because it came up as the comments, is that we provide a bit of a garbage room / access into the lower level to access the bikes and so on. From there, then they can go up the elevator and go to their suites and so on. The ground floor, which is the ground related level, again, has the restaurant with the southwest entry, nice large patio, ground level located patio. We decided to put it on the west end. There is enough sidewalk room to put it on the south end as well, and there is quite a bit of space on the east side as well. So we're really trying to animate this space as well as much as possible. It also faces south, so it's going to get most of the sun. That's why we actually felt that if we were going to put seating on the ground level, it was probably best to put it in this area. As I mentioned, the residential entry is on this side, and the lower level is off the lower level. The mezzanine level will have, again, some more seating, washrooms, again, access to the elevators for access for everyone. There's a internal stair that takes you down into the space. This would be the double height space. And we also have a terrace that surrounds the building on 3 sides. Again, taking advantage of all types of scenarios. Some people like sun. I'm a shade person, so I'd be sitting out here someplace enjoying the intersection and what's happening across the street. The second floor would house 4 residential units plus an outdoor terrace. We thought that because we're going up 3 stories, this gives them a nice little refuge that's away from everyone. And there's enough separation there that they can really enjoy the space. The 3rd and 4th story, again, would have 4 units per floor. Each unit themselves would have or be 1-bedroom units with 1 bath, and each one has a balcony, about 50 square foot balcony, give or take. With respect to form and character, what we are trying to achieve here is create 3 distinctive parts to the building. In many ways, it actually just conveys what's actually happening within the building as well, but it also adds to the streetscape in such a way where you can easily read the building. We'd like to start with a solid, heavy base, which houses the ground floor restaurant, very transparent, and it actually responds to all the corners in many ways. And it also provides an area where you don't have basically people looking out at you and so on. So it provides a variety, and I think that's what we're trying to convey here. There's also the patio that faces west, which again animates the street. Again, I haven't thrown in many, you can see I've thrown in a few umbrellas here on the side, but you can imagine how that would look as it becomes more and more animated. The second, or the mezzanine level, is this area here. And what this is actually stepped back from the building, and it's actually stepped back from the upper floor. So what you'll get at night is this lit kind of slit, and then this building sitting on top of another building, so to speak. So we're trying to lighten up the building. This building takes up almost the whole site, but the property lines are really invisible. What you're dealing with here is all of lot A, B, and C. But what this building does that some of the other buildings do not do is provide the synergy for the corner basically past 5 o'clock. And I think this is what we were trying to do here, that it becomes the corner, so to speak, at night. During the day, sure, there's a lot of people coming and going. This site is so easily accessible that even when you look at the Windward Pub, you'll find that a majority of the people that visit that restaurant are walking over from one of the other buildings. Past 5 o'clock, where the offices and so on shut down, then you probably get more people driving to the site. So this is a very urban kind of approach, we think, for this building, where parking becomes, I think, almost secondary. So this is basically the elevation facing west. This is the elevation facing north. This would be the elevation facing east, which again, this is the gathering area that I mentioned between buildings, the access to the residential area, and this is the recessed area off of Dufferin Street. I should have mentioned it looks very recessed at this point, but when you get down towards the east end where the driveway is accessing into building B, it's actually at level. So this, in many ways, this retaining wall that you see here actually starts at about 8 feet and then goes down to 0 at one point. And this is the south facing elevation, as you can see. I think Drew will speak to this a little more so, but because of the expropriation and the slope that we need for the driving, the sidewalks, the bike lanes, and so on and so forth, it's actually raised the grade with respect to this site. So what we actually have is a slightly recessed patio on the side. Having said that, the retaining wall makes for the retaining wall being actually quite low, and you'll see what Victoria has proposed in terms of landscaping. That retaining wall actually won't be visible at all. Apart from that, the materials, maybe I'll just comment quickly on the materials. What we envisioned for the lower plinth, heavy plinth, would be a masonry or masonry-looking material. For those of you that are familiar with Colville, there is some products out there that mimic masonry that are really quite attractive, and there's no efflorescence, there's no maintenance, there's nothing. They're pretty phenomenal. Whether we go to one or the other, it remains to be seen at this point. What we've proposed up above for the residential units is hardy panel, and that hardy panel, or those upper units, will be divided using a wood look metal siding. The idea in many ways was to try to break down the scale of this building as well. It's not a big building. However, the ground floor does have quite a bit of length along boundary, not so much along Dufferin Crescent. However, we just felt that animating this made it more suitable to this area and maintained the pedestrian scale that we wanted for this property. I think I've pretty well spoken about everything I wanted to, have your eye look at. At this point, I think we should maybe get, I don't want to take up too much of the time, take a bit of a look at the landscaping scheme, because this project really does incorporate the landscaping into the building. I don't know if Victoria is available. Is she here
I'm
today?
here. I'm here.
Oh, are you? Okay,
Yep.
great. Victoria, if you'd like to take over.
Yeah, sure. So the first, that page that's up, it just shows. So it's some of the sort of inspiration, I guess, and palette. But as both Donna very eloquently stated, and Igor as well, is that it's really about the street and it's about urban landscapes. And so if you're dealing with that kind of landscape, obviously it's a different thing than when you have a lot more room. So what we tried to do is we tried to use the street and tried to, as the others have said, incorporate a lot of urban features like seating, like just places where people can interact, and people can interact with people in the restaurant. They can interact with people walking around the street. So that's basically essentially what the landscape is about. So they're small spaces, but very densely planted, so that there's enough variety, and trying to get more of a sort of, and I say garden, not meaning vegetable gardening, but in the sort of traditional sense of more gardens rather than landscapes, if you see what I mean. Like, I think of a garden as a more intricate, more varied kind of planting than you'd see as a kind of landscape, which is sort of monocultures. So, and because we're trying to tie the Colville to Millstone and to from personally, not the hospital, because I haven't been working on the hospital, but with Millstone, there were boulevards, and they're different, but we're trying to still pull in the context from both. So Millstone had boulevards with street trees, and Colville had a kind of more plant-oriented sort of landscape out the front. But we had these, as Donna was saying, places for people to sit looking out of the street. So what we try to do on this one is both. We have, and actually on Millstone, we have a really nice space inside the site. So we're trying to kind of use both those techniques. So we've got seats that relate to the street. We've got seats that relate back to the restaurant. We've got seats that relate to the bus. And then we've got this little kind of private internal garden, which is much quieter, which is, I call it the scented garden. And I tried to put in plants with different scents, just playing around with that idea. So it's really, it's sort of, so that's basically the idea, which is everybody's talked about. And so the inspiration is both, there's a bioswale, so there's at the corner, which is the biggest sort of feature. So to pull in references to the Mount Benson ecosystem, because it's exposed, and here it's tricky to use our forest ecosystem because we've got a lot of sun and we can't put in huge trees, and so we can't use the shady forest. So pulling in the sort of, and Benson is visible from many higher, when you get higher, you can see Benson from a lot of these buildings. So using the top of that as a kind of inspiration, it's a little bit far-fetched, but it's a key, it's where to start from. So we've got that kind of feeling right on that corner and I just put one pine in there, so the one lone conifer. But again, they can become really beautiful sculpted shapes. We really don't have room to put in really big trees, and we've got a lot of building not to hide. Put it that way. So that's really, and then the rest of the planting is informed by plants that we're known to be really resilient in hot kind of urban environments, which is that sort of sidewalk streetscape garden, which and so try to introduce some flowering plants that'll cheer people up as they're walking back and forth from hospital. And so there's a lot of trying to do a lot with not a lot of space, but the space we have is really intricate. So that the other thing is to try and accent the entrance to the residence with putting in really nice planting there. So it stops your eye as you walk in. So you know you're going to turn in and go into the entrance to the residences. And as I say, there's that little kind of almost hidden garden to the scented garden. And then we really hope we can get these boulevard gardens that the city will approve them, because I think it's really nice opposite that patio to have that boulevard planting, so that the people are steered walking up and down and they're interacting with the patio seating. So and to stop children running into the corner, the intersection of the corner. So that was the sort of various different reasons for doing that planting, and shade to the sidewalk and all those kind of other things, reducing the temperature. As we all know, trees help out with that. So yeah, I think that's all. And if Drew can talk about the bioswale a little bit more, but that starts on the corner and then wends its way along parallel to Dufferin. Oh yeah, that's a big
There's a blow up.
That one, yeah, but it's the same. Yeah, I think it shows the same ideas. And then where Igor was talking about the loading dock down in where it's slightly depressed, we've got plants sort of softening those walls as well. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, I can jump in, Victoria, a little bit. I guess just to mirror a bit of what both Victoria and Igor said, a lot of kind of what's framing up this site is obviously the two frontage roads. And the city has moved towards the complete street design, which is set out in their manual of engineering and standards. And so that includes both a bike lane as well as a sidewalk. And for both these roads, they actually get classified as mobility streets, which means that the required sidewalk width is fairly substantial. I believe it's 4 to 4.6 meters along both frontages, and that's simply for the sidewalk. And then there's an additional 2-meter bike lane. So that ties into what Igor was talking about, where it sets those grades, because those are required to slope away from the curb, so up towards the property line at 2%, basically carries the grade of the road right up into that property line. And in the case of Dufferin, there's actually not enough road dedication to incorporate all of that, so a portion of the sidewalk is actually extends in an SRW onto the site. So that kind of frames up the site. As Victoria said, we are proposing to the city to use some of the sidewalk area for those benches and planting areas. In regards to the stormwater management, obviously the building and the parking areas take up a large percentage of this site. We do have that bioswale along the front corner, and so we have the opportunity there to have a substantial depth of soil, so in which we can discharge all the roof leaders from this building into that bioswale. And with that deep depth of soil, these bioswales are able to provide both water quality management items, as well as meet the city's detention and retention requirements. This site is tributary to the Millstone River. It does, after discharge to the storm sewer in Dufferin, it does end up in Beaufort Park, which is directly adjacent to this property. And there is a large city-owned stormwater management facility in there. Even with that deep depth of soil in the bioswale, we aren't able to quite hit the detention requirement needed. So there will be a detention pipe underneath with a flow control device that captures after the water has been filtered through the bioswale, it will capture that water and detain it so that the flow off the site matches the pre-development flow rate, which is a requirement of the city. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'm pretty sure nobody wants to get into the numbers that go behind that, so I will leave it there.
Okay, if that's it.
That's our presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Donna. Maybe stop sharing the screen now. Great. Okay. So does any of the panel members have any questions of staff on this project? Okay, so seeing none, maybe we can start with Tony, if you'd like to give your comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think this is a very important project, a very exciting, very important component to the whole comprehensive plan for the hospital campus, and it should be extremely successful with the components that are going into it, the residential accommodation, as well as obviously the food service. I think the design is very good, very well laid out. It's a very tricky site, not just the shape, but the grades are extremely serious, and I think the applicants done a really good job of incorporating them, particularly that lower entrance into the service space and the bike area and lockers. Certainly encourage that proposed additional little entrance there for convenience, so all the bikes don't have to go up and down the elevator. So that's good. The only small thing I got in terms of form and character is on the elevations all look great, but one doesn't really see a building in elevation. And when I looked at your 3D views, it seemed to me somehow that the top of the building looked a little unfinished. It almost looked like it needs a cap or some variation in the heights of the different kinds of massing panels or something. So it looked like it just been sort of lopped off and left. And I just wonder if that couldn't maybe get a little more attention. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but that kind of leapt off the page at me. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Short and sweet. Okay, thanks, Tony.
That's me.
Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Donna and your team. Very nice presentation. I will just jump in right away with Tony's comment, and I guess I would ask Igor if he looked at other options for the roof line. Personally, I like it. I think it's a refreshing change, but just to Igor, whether or not he looked at options to provide more of a canopy or a fascia along that the top.
Well, we have millstone that has a cornice on one end, and we have this is the way I looked at it. We have millstone that has a cornice on one end, and we have Colville that has a flat extension over it. I didn't want to mimic one of those things, and I find that sometimes that every building has to have a different top. And I think with this building, what I saw is that whole 3 floors being an element as opposed to it having detail. So that in many ways, what this building has that the other two don't have, they don't have elements that are traditional, that have been tried, that have been added in a modern way. This one actually, if anything, one of the things that I probably will do is the upper floor, wherever we have the balconies, I'd probably add another covered area so that the upper balconies do have some cover. So again, some overhanging, but I think I really prefer the modern, simplistic kind of look of this building. And what we can try to do maybe is extend the roof or the white portions that you see in the renderings a little higher than the metal clad portions. Just so, because what I was trying to do is get a bunch of cubes sitting on top of this plinth, so to speak. So it's very, again, it's traditional in the sense that it has a plinth, a middle, and a top, but I don't really need the cornice element, as is the way I was looking at it.
Okay, yeah, because I know I've been around that neighborhood many times, and most of the buildings, especially the new buildings, are very simplistic in their geometric forms, and it's really a matter of how you deal with the rest of it. I noticed similarities to the supportive housing and also the medical building across the street. There's a lot of similarities, so I'm fine with it. I'll let everyone else jump in to see whether or not they agree with having sort of a cornice or a fascia along the top. I'm not sure where to start, but with respect to the parking, I guess the restaurant that's going to be built, Donna, is it going to be like a franchise, or is it going to be just a restaurant that'll be constructed, and also whether or not it's going to be open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or is it going to be just lunch and dinner? Those are the types of things that might relate to how the parking is going to work.
Yeah. So the restaurant, part of the reason the restaurant has to be the next building that is built is because when the hotel goes in, we will not be having food services in the hotel. So we'll need somewhere for breakfast. Okay. Right. So part of the restaurant piece is to service the people who are staying in the hotel because they've come here for cancer treatment and they've come with a spouse and they have to stay, 2 or 3 days for their treatment. So yes, the restaurant, we have an MOU currently with a private group that's not a franchise. It is two, and I will say the Windward Pub is part of that, but it's two groups that have come together to form a new style of restaurant that is community focused. So things like pizza ovens, like I said, grab and go sandwiches, as well as sit down meals. So there's a wide variety of services that they're required under their MOU to provide, and breakfast, lunch, and dinner are under that. They will have a liquor license, but of course that will be limited to evenings and whatnot so that they can open for breakfast. They're also required to service families. So people coming to the hospital right now for someone in palliative, they come as families. So they bring children. So we need somewhere for those people to be able to eat. I mean, I've been a parent in Peds for 2 weeks where I slept on the little chair on the floor, and there was nowhere for food because the hospital cafeteria was closed by the time my surgeon had come to deal with my child. Mm-hmm. So this restaurant is about addressing those needs on sort of a multifaceted level. So it's not going to be a franchise like a Denny's or an IHOP. We specifically, because the other piece we feel about the campus is about community, right? And so that's why we've opted to go with someone who is a couple of different who both own restaurants already and who are attached with some of the groups out of Vancouver that also own restaurants, but that can more provide a service directly for the campus, as opposed to dealing with a big chain who's like, yeah, these are ours. We're not going to provide room service to the hotel. Like that was one of our requirements. So
no, I really appreciate that, Donna, because I agree it's something that's totally really needed in that neighborhood. I've been in visiting people in palliative care across the street, and I know what it's like to be there late at night or even in the evenings, and there's no place to go that's close by. So I really appreciate that, but not knowing the timeline of what's going to happen with on Lot C, what is your program for parking in the meantime?
So parking in the meantime, because the Windward Pub has actually closed, parking in the meantime will involve on a permanent basis a reciprocal access agreement to Lot C to park in any of those spaces that are there. It will, on a temporary basis until Lot C is developed with the 2 floors of parking, also require a statutory right-of-way which will allow them to park in our parkade, which is directly next door. So just so you know how Colville is structured, it's a little bit different. It's a stratified building, but the parkade is actually a stratalot that we personally, or our company actually owns. So it is not common property to that building. It is actually, so there will be actually access to the parking and agreement signed with our company to use those extra spaces. And we have over 100 extra spaces at that building that are over and above the requirement that we needed for that building. And we did that on purpose Millstone has a small parkade, which is owned in a similar sort of way. But it's right across the street the other way as well. And we also control all of that parking, and we have more parking there than we need as well for that building. So we've intentionally strategically built those facilities first to build up the parking that we needed so that we could build this until the hotel comes. Right. Because part of the campus, the buildings that we're putting in, we own other property on the campus, which we're getting a lot of pressure right now for development, is as the hospital services the 450,000 people north of the Malahat. Quite frankly, there's need for more and more services. So we're getting lots of pressure to put in, more spaces as we go. And so for the 12 units, yeah. So there'll be parking spaces dedicated to them down below below I probably B? to be honest with you, Kevin, I wouldn't put them down below. I would, for now, they would go up top. Okay. And we'll move them around to the parkade, which is security cameras. I'm just talking, our office is here. So I'm here 7 days a week, quite frankly. And we have cameras on our whole site. So we want to make sure that our people have secure, safe parking, because we see what happens here when we're not here. Perfect. I was going to mention something about the roof garden, but I won't mention it because I know what the answer is going to be. And being that you do have amenity terraces, a terrace there for the residential units, and also a very nice terrace for the restaurant, I'll just cross that one off because I know what the answer is going to be. Aside from that, the corner, you did such a wonderful job across the street at the medical building there with public art and creating sort of a public plaza there. Did you look at any ways to make the corner, I know in a perfect situation, you would access the restaurant off the corner, but it never works on a corner lot. So did you look at ways to add more benches there, public art, maybe introducing pavers and stuff like that? Did you look at anything like that? So there's a couple of things going on at the corner. I'm in an ongoing long conversation actually with the city of Nanaimo with transportation on actually pedestrians crossing that corner. And I do have to say they've been fantastic and added at the crosswalk down the road, they added blinking lights for us. We have lots of accidents at this corner, but this corner on our property, I don't know if you've noticed that they recently put the light control onto that corner. It's wrapped in a really ugly piece of art. The city's already heard about that from me. And we're looking actually at a program that has to stay. That can't go. That's the controller sitting. It looks like a PMT, but it's not. It's actually to control the street lights. We're actually in discussions now with the city about all of those devices, including PMTs, being a wayfinding device. So we want to wrap them in wraps that will be specific to the campus, that will be wayfinding devices. So that's what we're looking about, doing those structures that are standing out of the ground there. And I can't unfortunately move those. The other thing you'll see, and it's hard to see on the plan, but where the massive structure goes around the corner, we have the masonry. Igor kindly drew on one of the elevations, sort of this blue image. We're hoping to do something three-dimensional physically on the walls, right? For the name of the building? So there'll be a name of the building, but you're completely right. The millstone at the Millstone building, I had that hand carved in New England and paid a fortune to have it shipped here, and I love it. So we're hoping that you'll see the name on one side and a 3D piece of art on the other, and that's with the blue ink, which we just haven't figured out what that piece of art would be. Okay. And then, of course, the landscaping that goes in front of that wall is actually terraced to follow the slope, so that I have the seating on the one side with the landscaping kind of growing over softly over the edge to minimize that concrete wall. So that whole corner will be quite animated. And like I say, just deciding what those wayfinding devices, our pad mount transformer will move from there. There is one there now. We've already met with Hydro. They're fantastic. They have the drawings from 1974 for this site. So we've already met with them. We can move that transformer out of that corner to kind of clear that up a bit. But that is what we're doing to create some interest at that corner. Yeah, perfect. And on that corner, the window that looks into the kitchen area, are you going to have it transparent, or are you going to have opaque glass on there? I gotta be honest with you, I'd like to see it be transparent.
I would too.
Because I think that's part of the fun animation of seeing what's
Exactly.
going on, seeing the chef and his staff and their sous chef and whatnot doing their prep.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hoping you'll do that because it'll be elevated a bit. But I think I like transparency with something like that. So hopefully you do that.
Yeah.
With form and character, again, I like the form and character. I like your colors. I like how it blends in with the concept of the neighborhood. The terraces, I like the strong base that Igor's provided with the dark color. It gives it a real good solid base to the building. The screening of rooftop equipment, I think from a distance, you will definitely see them, especially coming along Boundary from the north. So I hope you'll use materials that are complementary to the materials of the building there. And the only other thing I'm looking at and I'm trying to decide where it is for the people, the 12 units, where are the mailboxes? I'm not sure if there's room in the vestibule for the mail for the.
So they'll be recessed in the wall, and our Canada Post person, she does actually deliver right into, so there's not like a gang box at the street, so it will be in that vestibule right there at the front door. Yeah,
I just wanted, because it was so small, I guess it would have to be recessed.
Yeah.
But and the landscape concept, Victoria, I think you did a great job with a limited site and keeping the kind of like the urban feel to it. I can talk to you about the tree that I want to see in there, but I know you're not going to put it in, but at least you do have a shore pine in there, which is really nice to have. And I like the bioswale and everything that Drew did as well. So very nice project. So thank you very much.
Okay, and Kate.
Okay. Well, first, thank you very much for your presentation. I was looking forward to seeing this project come through design panel, and I really appreciate just what you're doing in this neighborhood on the hospital campus, and how you can be very specific about your uses and then that the building responds to that. And I think that's excellent. It's not often developers are able to be so specific, and it allows you to build something like this. And I have a couple comments, and more about when Tony mentioned the roof and what it looked like. I was like, oh yes, I was feeling like something was not quite right. But once the architect explained, I think by adding canopy over the top decks, that would change that feeling of it being locked off, and that may be enough for it to have a different quality. So I think that will, as you said, that's something you're considering and most likely going to do anyway. And so I do believe that will change that feeling. I really enjoy the landscape, and I really hope the city allows you to have this sort of push and pull of the sidewalk and the plantings and the switching sides. I think that really helps animate the sidewalk and gives us a lot more tree coverage over that sidewalk and a lot more little pockets of planting. So I really appreciate that, and I hope that gets approved and carries on as it is. And one thing I thought that the renderings did a disservice to the scale and size of those retaining walls that connect the building to your existing offices, Donna. And once I look at the sections, I can see that back one is not as high or not as exposed as it will be, and that the front plantings on the bioswale will really mitigate its presence. And I don't really think like cascading plants are necessary in that context. I think the planting palette is appropriate. But you could potentially consider a slight variation on that concrete wall, or doing some small detail that's not too costly but simple, but it doesn't look like it's going to be as exposed as it seems. And I have one other comment. I appreciated, Donna, you talking about the corner. I was contemplating that corner. I actually like that the restaurant accesses off of that, on the other side. I think it works well with this particular intersection and all the activity of what's going on. And I appreciate too, that big window, it's sort of mirroring what's going on up on the hospital site with their that new building that went in. We love that building. I live in this neighborhood, and walking by it, it just has made something that could be so boring interesting, because we can see into and see all this infrastructure. And I love it when that happens. So I think having this big window is your art piece in a sense, right? And that you don't need to kind of clutter up the space. I will say one comment though. I think we all have different opinions about art. And I do know the artist whose wrap is on that box. I'm not a big fan of these boxes, but I do like the artists and their art. So I just think we can refrain from, we all have different opinions, and art is different and perceived differently. But I love the cheerful nature of his work, and it's doing it the best it can with a box, I suppose. Yeah, so I actually have no recommendation, no recommendation, just that I hope the streetscape design is able to be maintained. I would hate to see the plantings reduced. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kate. Angela.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Donna and Art. It's not Arden.
Igor.
Igor. I know. I was trying to remember. I love this project. I love the depth of personal commitment you have to this neighborhood, and gets me emotional a little bit. I don't know why. But as a planner, this is what you'd like to see with any development, is the level of intimacy with the community. I really don't understand this. Maybe it's late and I just have to go to the bathroom.
Or the queen.
Yeah, the queen. Anyhow, I did have the same sort of thoughts as Tony did initially about the rooftop, and my thoughts were to add some sort of weather protection. So what you were saying is put some overhangs. Maybe that will help, but also help protect those people using the deck. So I think that would be add more usability to that deck as well. More about the building. I agree with staff with considering maybe some rooftop, green rooftop elements, maybe not the whole thing. Maybe it will help with some of the retention that is needed for the stormwater management. And there is a fair bit of amenity going on in the landscaping plan and the actual structure with these outdoor areas, but maybe there's an opportunity for a small outdoor space on the rooftop if you decide to do a green roof as part of this project. And what else? I was thinking the corner. I wasn't so sure about the big window, and I was thinking art installation as others were, and then there's these other complications, and understanding that there will be a lot more landscaping to grow in and soften that corner. I love the idea of looking into the space as well. There's activity happening in the kitchen. Super fun for kids to see that happening inside. I don't know if there's an opportunity to potentially have that as a retractable doorway that you can see through. So in the summer when it's hot, I know kitchens get pretty brutal in the summer. Throw the doors up. It might be something that could be integrated and, like Igor says, add to the animation of the building itself. Otherwise, the landscaping plan is obviously very well thought out and very using as much space as you could possibly use on the site. And I love the scented garden, although it's in the middle of a roundabout area. And maybe in the summer when people are driving through, the windows open, you can get some wafts of the scented garden. So I think that's a really nice touch. And otherwise, I think that was all the sort of comments I had to add. And just great job. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Angela. Yeah, and thanks to the team here. First of all, Donna, I greatly appreciate hearing the context for this building. I kind of figured there was a lot more when I read the application, and it was good to sort of see what the whole picture was in terms of the larger property. And so I think it's a really great addition to the hospital area. Short-term housing is a really great idea, along with the restaurant there. And I think the architectural form has made really good use of that corner with the restaurant and having kind of a pedestal base to the building. Again, my only comment on the building would be the same as everybody else. I felt like there's something missing on the top floor, but I noticed as well there's no weather protection for those top balconies. So I think some consideration of adding that somehow might just solve that problem. It'll give it a little variation to kind of close it off, not necessarily even running the whole width of the building, at least just covering up those balconies, making them a little bit more usable in all weather would be helpful. So that would be great. Yeah, and I think you've sort of thought out the parking situation. I'm not too worried about it. It's a weird variance to ask for, absolutely no parking, but I'm totally fine with that. And the last thing I thought of, you mentioned, you've really sort of thought about the bike trails and people riding bikes and using them, at least people living in that building. But I'm wondering, within the campus as a whole, if you might consider at some point introducing bike lockers for other staff and people that come. I know like at UVic, some of the universities have these, and students have access lockable lockers where they could put their bikes, and tire fixing stand and that kind of thing. Something you might think of just for the hospital grounds in general, for either patients and family that are coming on bicycles or staff that could use it. So just an idea, because sometimes just having the open bike racks these days, and you've got these very expensive e-bikes. I don't like even locking them up outside. So anyway,
I could say, Marie, that we have talked about doing some of that within our parkade, because our parkade is all cameraed. Yeah. So it has security. So we have looked at doing something like that, and particularly in the corners, that we could actually physically doing something that air flows through and whatnot. So we are in that conversation with our group of doctors already, kind of about that for their patients. But I do know that the hospital also has a bike room with lockers in it as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my sister visited UVic one day, just riding her bike there, and she discovered they had this bike locker. She was able to use it, and so if you had a flat tire or something, there were some tools and place to fix your bike, and it was just really, really handy. I thought, well, that would be great, something like that, or concierge service. So.
Valet.
The valet, yeah, the bike valet. Anyway,
it exists in other countries.
I believe it.
Well, I think you almost have to start going to it these days, because it's just so risky, and it's a big investment when you put in that into your bicycle. But anyway, that won't make that a formal recommendation. It came to mind when you were talking about the overall campus plan. So that's great. Okay, so anybody else have any comments, questions before we get going? Tony?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just one. Not to pick on this roof thing that I started. I think the idea of putting shelters over those uppermost balconies is good, not just for the added use, but also it means you won't have to put a rainwater leader down from them because they'll be covered. So you'll save a bit of money there. That'll obviously affect the roof line, and I think everything will be happy. But just speaking of the roof, it was mentioned the possibility of a green roof, which is nice. But more importantly, I don't know if I missed this somewhere in the presentation, but given the health and wellness and the whole sort of progressive nature of what's going on at the NRGH, Is there been any thought to doing the rooftop garden where you could actually grow a little bit of the, vegetables and herbs and stuff like that? A lot of new age restaurants are doing that these days. Well, not a lot, but some, I guess. And just popped into my head that I should have mentioned that earlier, but I'll just throw it out now as a suggestion.
So I will say on the physical upper roof above the condos, there won't be that opportunity. We will have green roof opportunities at, part of the reason there's a larger deck off the first level of the apartments is so that there can be some green roof there. We do have some stormwater retention that's actually going underneath the paving stones that are on that and the restaurant outside decking. So we are using that piece. We expect that the restaurant itself will use some of that garden area at that second outdoor level seating area. But as a comment, we've already done our preliminary design on the hotel. The hotel, when you drive into that lot, will just have basically a core that, your concierge and your check-in is. But when you go up a level, it has a whole outside rooftop garden on both sides of the building that you can walk out on that will all be green roof. So that we have thought about that, because when we start getting into the hotel conversation, we need to start having conversations about where does a minister come to have meetings? Where does counseling happen? What is our First Nations component? Those are the discussions we're in on the hotel. And they do have two very large green roof sections when the hotel piece goes in, but we will be incorporating the green roof piece on smaller sections on those outdoor seating areas that you do see there.
Great, thanks, Donna. Anything else?
Donna, can I just jump in? Donna, where is the hotel going to be?
The hotel is going to be where the current Windward pub is. That's actually legally a whole other separate lot. And there's a set of stairs between the two bigger buildings. So that one side, if I'm looking from Boundary on the right, will all be demolished. And then the hotel will come out of the ground there.
And how many floors is that going to be?
It's 6 stories and it's 75 rooms.
Okay, and the cancer care facility is going to be in that building as well?
No, so the Cancer Center is a $500 million project that is actually going along Boundary Crescent, further along where they put a parking lot now. So that's what that parking lot, they paved it for now, but it's actually going there. The Cancer Center won't come until after the new $1 billion tower, because 30% of all patients from a cancer clinic have to go into the tower. And we don't have, right now we're 345 beds where we're 400 patients a day. We can't accommodate. So the new tower will happen next. And then the Cancer Center will follow closely on the heels behind that. And it is the Cancer Center will be along Boundary. Just once you get past there, they've just put in that new, generator facility, their energy, little energy, it's right behind that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Donna.
Okay. Anything else before we figure out our recommendations here? I'm seeing one, consider providing covering the upper balconies, and then maybe that would just resolve the whole roof thing. We don't need to really mention that, I think, as Tony mentioned. So consider covering the upper balconies, consider screening the rooftop services with complementary materials. And I don't know, Angela, if you wanted to include this, consider using large opening windows for the restaurant. I don't know if that's...
Can I maybe just speak to that? Because that's a valid point. I think that conversation will end up having to come back to Island Health, right? Because that's the kitchen that will have the large fan, and they have their guidelines about what we can or cannot do there. Okay. So I just as a heads up, that Island Health would have a big say on what we're allowed to do in the kitchen of a restaurant.
Oh, that was the kitchen window? Okay.
That big window's in the kitchen.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you want to leave that as a recommendation, Angela?
No, just a comment.
Okay.
Just an idea.
Take that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Kevin, you had a comment?
Yeah, on that topic with the exhaust fans, they're going to have to exhaust out onto out the walls. Is that correct?
So it will come out directly onto it will go through the second level seating. It'll be on the outside of the building, completely clad to look like the building all the way up to the roof.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good. So it won't disturb any of the residents.
Well, my office is right next door. I don't want to hear it running all the time.
I lived once right above a restaurant. It was horrible. Consider having, and I think I'm just seeing two recommendations then, in case unless I missed something. So consider covering the upper balconies and consider screening the rooftop services with complementary materials. Is there anything I missed there, folks? No? Okay, can I have a motion to accept the development proposal as presented with those recommendations? And, and approval of the variance? Okay, moved by Kevin, seconded by...
Hold on. I believe we're not supposed to make any comments in support or not support of parking variances. Christine could jump in on that to confirm it, but I would just say that maybe we just need to accept it as application as presented with those two recommendations.
Yeah, usually that parking element is, I guess if we start to look at delegated authority, but yeah, just probably as you said, Kevin.
Okay, we will just, okay, a motion to accept the proposal as accepted with the two recommendations. Kevin moves, and who's seconding? Kate seconds, and all in favor? Great, there we go. Job done. Thank you very much for your hard work on that project. Look forward to seeing it.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Perfect. Oh,
Thank you.
Chair, sorry, just to adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, okay, I was just going to do that. So we have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Everybody needs to use the washroom, I think. Who's going to motion? Somebody want a motion? Kate, great. Seconder. Kevin, all in favor? I don't see anybody saying no. Okay. Good night, all. Take care.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.